On the surface, Israel and Saudi Arabia are supposed to be enemies. They do not share borders, they do not share a culture, they certainly do not share public statements about each other. For decades, Saudi Arabia positioned itself as a guardian of Islamic values, protector of Mecca and Medina, and a vocal supporter of Palestinian rights. Israeli officials, meanwhile, openly criticized Saudi policies. The Arab League called for boycotts. Textbooks in Saudi schools referred to Israel with hostile terminology. But here is what nobody talks about openly. Behind closed doors, in unmarked buildings, and in secure communications channels, these two countries have been working together for over 60 years. Not in a casual way, not in a limited, temporary arrangement. They have built a sophisticated intelligence sharing apparatus. They have coordinated military operations. They have planned joint strategies against common adversaries. And they have done all of this while maintaining perfect public separation. The question is not whether this alliance exists anymore. The evidence is too overwhelming. The question is why it started, how it evolved, and where it is heading. Because understanding this hidden partnership is crucial to understanding Middle Eastern geopolitics. Everything happening in the region right now flows through this relationship. To understand why Israel and Saudi Arabia became allies, you need to go back to a moment when the entire Middle East was being redrawn. The year was 1962. Yemen was in chaos. The country was split between a deposed monarch, an imam with deep Saudi connections, and a new Republican government backed by Egypt and the Soviet Union. Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser was the dominant force in the Arab world at that moment. He had Soviet backing. He had military superiority. He was attempting to consolidate Arab nationalism under his leadership, which posed a direct threat to both Saudi Arabia and Israel. Saudi Arabia feared losing regional influence. Israel feared a Soviet-backed alliance stretching across the Arab world. So both countries made the same calculation. They both sent weapons, training, and resources to support the Yemeni royalists against Nasser's Republicans. But here is where it gets significant. They coordinated. Saudi Arabia provided the logistical base. Israel provided the weapons and military expertise. Their intelligence agencies, Mossad and Saudi intelligence, directly communicated to make the operation work. According to declassified reports, Israeli military aircraft flew covert supply missions into Yemen, deliberately avoiding Saudi radar systems while operating from Israeli bases. Israeli pilots concealed the origins of weapons shipments by removing serial numbers and using foreign packaging. Saudi Arabia provided the airspace and did not ask questions. The operation was called Porcupine, and it ran for more than 2 years. The heads of Israel's Mossad and Saudi Arabia's intelligence service actually met in person at the Dorchester Hotel in London to coordinate. This was not a theoretical alliance. This was active military cooperation. And it worked. It demonstrated something crucial that both nations realized in that moment. Together, they could accomplish regional objectives that would be impossible separately. That realization did not disappear when the Yemen civil war ended. It became the foundation for everything that came next. For years after Yemen, the relationship remained dormant on the surface, but active beneath it. Then something happened that would accelerate everything. In 1979, Iran's Islamic Revolution occurred. A Shiite theocracy took power. It immediately declared its intention to spread revolutionary Islam throughout the region and oppose both Western influence and conservative Arab monarchies. For Saudi Arabia, this was an existential threat. Iran was a major regional power. It opposed the Saudi monarchy. It backed Shiite populations inside Saudi Arabia's borders. It challenged Saudi Arabia's role as the leader of the Islamic world. From Saudi Arabia's perspective, Iran was trying to destabilize the kingdom itself. For Israel, the threat was different but equally serious. Iran began building nuclear capabilities. It began funding anti-Israeli militant groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. It positioned itself as the leader of anti-Western, anti-Israeli sentiment across the Middle East. Israel saw nuclear Iran as an existential threat to its survival. By the late 1970s and into the 1980s, both countries realized they shared an enemy. Not just a rival, but an enemy. A country that threatened their security, their regional position, and their future stability. This was not about shared ideology or values anymore. This was about survival. And both nations understood that they could help each other counter that threat. Intelligence sharing began in earnest. Informal meetings became regular consultations. Both countries started coordinating on Iran policy without formally acknowledging they were doing it. Saudi Arabia would allow Israeli aircraft to transit its airspace. Israel would share intelligence about Iranian capabilities with Saudi Arabia. They were not allies in any official sense. They were intelligence partners working toward mutual security goals. Throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s, this covert relationship deepened. When Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, invaded Kuwait in 1990, both Israel and Saudi Arabia faced the same dilemma. Saddam was a mutual threat. Both countries wanted him defeated. But Saudi Arabia was leading an international coalition, and including Israel publicly would have destroyed the coalition politically. So what happened? Israel did not retaliate when Iraqi missiles struck Israeli territory. Publicly, this looked like Israeli restraint. In reality, Israel was coordinating with Saudi Arabia to avoid giving Arab coalition members an excuse to abandon the alliance. This was a strategic calculation made between two countries that could not publicly acknowledge their partnership. The result was a successful military campaign that protected both nations' interests. After the Gulf War, the relationship evolved again. By the early 1990s, the Oslo Peace Accords between Israel and the Palestinian Authority created new opportunities for behind-the-scenes dialogue. Saudi officials and Israeli officials began holding secret meetings. Not official diplomatic sessions, but unacknowledged consultations where both sides could discuss shared concerns about Iran, terrorism, and regional stability. By the 2000s, this covert relationship was so established that it became a known secret. Analysts understood it was happening. The media reported on it. But both governments continued denying it publicly while actively maintaining it privately. They had created a perfect system. They could cooperate on security matters while maintaining complete public separation. Saudi Arabia could appease its domestic constituency by opposing Israel. Israel could maintain its relationship with a key regional power without forcing Saudi Arabia into a publicly untenable position. Then came 2020. The Trump administration brokered what became known as the Abraham Accords. The United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, both Saudi allies, normalized relations with Israel publicly. This was supposed to be the moment when Saudi Arabia followed, when the kingdom would take the final step and establish official diplomatic relations with Israel, making the hidden partnership officially recognized. But it did not happen. Saudi Arabia held back. Why? Because there is a difference between what a government does strategically and what it can do politically. Saudi Arabia faces domestic constraints. It is the custodian of Islam's holiest sites. It has a large Palestinian expatriate population. Its religious establishment has genuine concerns about Palestinian rights. So Saudi Arabia took a different approach. It did not sign the Abraham Accords formally, but it did something remarkable. It allowed direct flights from Tel Aviv to pass through Saudi Arabian airspace to reach Abu Dhabi and Manama. This was unprecedented. It was a signal. It meant that Saudi Arabia was choosing pragmatism over public principle. It was saying, "We will not formalize this relationship but we are going to allow the facts on the ground to reflect what already exists between us. More recently, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman held secret meetings with Israeli officials. Reports emerged in 2023 that normalization talks were actively underway, mediated by the United States. The talks stalled during the Gaza conflict, but the point was clear. Both countries wanted formal recognition. The only obstacle was timing and domestic political constraints. So, why does this alliance matter? Why can't these two countries just stay in the shadows if they're already cooperating? The answer lies in understanding the true nature of Middle Eastern geopolitics over the past 4 decades. The region isn't controlled by one conflict. It's controlled by multiple overlapping proxy wars, all of which trace back to the same central rivalry: Iran versus the Sunni Arab states led by Saudi Arabia, with Israel as an interested party sharing common threats with both Saudi Arabia and the Gulf monarchies. In Syria, Iran backed the Assad government, while Saudi Arabia supported various rebel groups fighting against Assad. These weren't isolated conflicts. They were part of a larger competition for regional influence. Israel had its own interest in Syria because of Iranian military buildup near its borders and Hezbollah's entrenchment. In Yemen, the situation became even more explicit. Saudi Arabia led a military coalition against Houthi rebels, who are backed by Iran. Israel, while not officially involved in Yemen, shared intelligence with Saudi Arabia about Iranian weapons shipments and drone operations. When Saudi Arabia's oil facilities were struck by Iranian-backed drone attacks in 2019, both countries responded with coordinated strategies. Saudi Arabia led the military response, while Israel shared intelligence about Iranian capabilities. In Iraq, Iran built influence through Shiite militias, while Saudi Arabia and Israel supported forces that could counter Iranian expansion. Again, not officially coordinated in most cases, but strategically aligned. In Lebanon, Hezbollah, Iran's most capable proxy, posed threats to both Israel and Saudi Arabia's interests. Intelligence sharing between Israel and Saudi Arabia accelerated when this became a critical security concern. The pattern is unmistakable. Wherever Iran projects power, Israel and Saudi Arabia find themselves on the same side. Whether it's intelligence sharing, military coordination, or even allowing Israeli aircraft to pass through Saudi airspace during Iranian threats, the two countries act as allies when it matters most. By 2015, this had become so obvious that Israeli military officials stopped hiding it. In November 2017, the Israeli Defense Forces Chief of General Staff gave an exclusive interview to Saudi media. He explicitly stated that Israel and Saudi Arabia shared the same view of Iran as a threat. He talked about intelligence cooperation. He mentioned complete agreement on Iran between the two countries. Benjamin Netanyahu went further. When Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman faced international criticism over the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, Netanyahu publicly defended him. Netanyahu called it very important for the stability of the region and the world that Saudi Arabia remains stable. He wasn't just making a political statement. He was signaling that Israel and Saudi Arabia had become so aligned that defending one was defending the other. This wasn't subtle. This was a major world leader, essentially admitting that Israel considered Saudi Arabia's stability a matter of Israeli national interest. And that admission made sense only if you understood the full scope of the hidden alliance. By 2023 and 2024, the relationship had evolved even further. When Iran launched direct attacks on Israel with over 300 drones and missiles, Saudi Arabia didn't just refrain from supporting Iran. Saudi Arabia provided radar data and airspace information that helped defend Israel against the Iranian attack. This was military support and operational cooperation in real time. Here's the thing that makes this situation so unusual in international relations. Two countries that want to be formal allies can't be because of political and domestic constraints on one side. Saudi Arabia benefits from this arrangement with Israel. It gets intelligence, military coordination, and security cooperation against Iran. But it can't go public with it without facing massive domestic and regional backlash. 96% of Saudis surveyed in 2023 believed Arab nations should cut ties with Israel. The Wahhabi clerical establishment, which Saudi Arabia depends on for religious legitimacy, actively opposes normalization with Israel. The Palestinian expatriate population inside Saudi Arabia would consider normalization a betrayal of Islamic values. So, Saudi Arabia has created a unique solution. It maintains public opposition to Israel while engaging in deep cooperation behind closed doors. It allows Israeli aircraft to pass through its airspace while condemning Israeli actions in Gaza. It holds intelligence meetings with Israeli officials while supporting Palestinian causes. This isn't hypocrisy exactly. It's a strategic calculation that the benefits of the hidden alliance outweigh the costs of public separation. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has made clear that Saudi Arabia will normalize relations with Israel, but only after there's progress on the Palestinian question. This sounds like a condition that could take decades to resolve, and that's the point. It preserves Saudi Arabia's ability to cooperate with Israel while maintaining the fiction that there are still obstacles to overcome. The Abraham Accords of 2020 represented something significant. They made what was hidden between Israel and Saudi Arabia semi-public through Saudi Arabia's Gulf allies. The UAE and Bahrain, both Saudi allies that Saudi Arabia has enormous influence over, went public with Israel. This told you something crucial about how Saudi Arabia views the alliance. Saudi Arabia didn't explicitly endorse the Abraham Accords in the beginning, but it allowed its closest partners to sign on. It didn't block their participation. It allowed air routes to be opened across its territory. This was Saudi Arabia's way of saying, we're okay with this alliance becoming more public, but we can't be the first mover. The Accords fundamentally changed the Middle Eastern calculation. They established that normalization with Israel could happen without requiring resolution of the Palestinian question first. For decades, Arab states had maintained that this was a prerequisite. The Abraham Accords proved that it was negotiable. Suddenly, the question wasn't if Saudi Arabia would normalize with Israel, but when. Today, in 2025, the reality is this. Israel and Saudi Arabia operate as de facto military and intelligence allies, despite the lack of formal diplomatic relations. They coordinate on Iranian threats. They share intelligence in real time. They allow each other tactical advantages in regional conflicts. When Houthi rebels, backed by Iran, attack shipping in the Red Sea, Israel and Saudi Arabia respond with coordinated strategies. When Iran enriches uranium to near weapons-grade levels, both countries express alarm and coordinate responses. When terrorism threatens either country's security, intelligence flows between them immediately. This isn't an alliance that exists because both countries love each other. It's not based on shared culture or values. It's based on the cold calculation that Iran and Iranian-backed proxies pose a greater threat than each other does. It's based on the recognition that they can accomplish more together than apart. And it's increasingly visible. Israeli officials travel to Saudi Arabia for meetings. Saudi officials allow Israeli delegations to visit. Technology cooperation is happening. Defense industry coordination is taking place. Military exercises are being planned. In 2023, something happened that surprised many observers. China brokered a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The two countries agreed to restore diplomatic relations and reduce hostilities. This was supposed to be a game changer. It was supposed to reduce tensions and make cooperation between Israel and Saudi Arabia less necessary. But here's what actually happened. Saudi Arabia maintained its coordination with Israel. The Saudi-Iranian rapprochement was real, but it didn't eliminate the underlying threat perception. Iran's nuclear program continued advancing. Iran's proxy network remained active. Saudi Arabia realized that you can have dialogue with Iran while simultaneously maintaining an alliance with Israel. You can pursue peace talks while keeping military coordination with other partners. This showed something crucial about how Saudi Arabia now operates. It has moved beyond the either-or thinking of the Cold War era. It's pursuing multiple relationships simultaneously. It's talking to Iran while working with Israel. It's seeking Chinese investment while maintaining American security cooperation. It's pragmatic. It's sophisticated. It's exactly what a major regional power does when it's trying to maximize its position. Here's the uncomfortable reality that nobody wants to acknowledge. The Palestinian question has become a secondary concern for both Israel and Saudi Arabia compared to the Iran threat. This isn't to say Saudi Arabia has abandoned Palestinian rights. It hasn't. It still calls for a two-state solution. It still provides financial support to Palestinian organizations. But when forced to choose between supporting the Palestinian cause and pursuing strategic cooperation with Israel against Iran, Saudi Arabia chooses the latter. This is why Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman can say normalization with Israel requires Palestinian progress while simultaneously allowing Israeli aircraft to use Saudi airspace. The normalization remains conditional, but the cooperation happens anyway. This creates a moral contradiction that many Middle Eastern observers are uncomfortable discussing. But understanding this contradiction is crucial to understanding how the region actually operates. Geopolitics often trump ideology. Threat perception determines alignment. And Saudi Arabia has clearly determined that countering Iran is more important than isolating Israel. So, where is this heading? What happens next? The evidence suggests a few trajectories. First, formal normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia will happen. The only question is timing. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman clearly wants it. Israeli leadership clearly wants it. The United States clearly wants it. The obstacle is domestic politics, not strategic interest. That obstacle will eventually be overcome. Second, the security cooperation will deepen. Military coordination will become more explicit. Defense technology sharing will increase. Joint operations against Iranian threats are already happening at the intelligence level. At some point, they may become more visible. Third, this will cement a new regional architecture. The Arab-Israeli alliance, focused on countering Iran, will become the organizing principle of Middle Eastern geopolitics. This challenges everything that was built after the 1948 Arab-Israeli conflict. It fundamentally reorders the region. Some countries won't follow Saudi Arabia's lead. Algeria, Iraq, and Pakistan have all indicated they won't normalize with Israel regardless of what Saudi Arabia does. But the trend is clear. The Abraham Accords, started by the UAE and Bahrain, are expanding. The hidden alliance between Israel and Saudi Arabia is becoming less hidden. The strategic logic that drives them together is only strengthening. The final question is this: why does this alliance remain hidden if it's so extensive and so strategically important? Why can't Israel and Saudi Arabia just be open about it? The answer reveals something profound about Middle Eastern politics. Saudi Arabia still depends on presenting itself as a guardian of Islamic values. Its legitimacy, its hold on power, and its role in the Muslim world all depend on this positioning. Public alliance with Israel would fundamentally undermine that. Even though cooperation with Israel serves Saudi Arabia's strategic interests, openly embracing it would create massive domestic pressure and regional criticism. Israel, on the other hand, wants Saudi Arabia to go public. Israeli leadership craves formal recognition from the Arab world. Public alliance with Saudi Arabia would accomplish that. It would legitimize Israel regionally in ways that formal peace treaties haven't. But Israel also understands Saudi Arabia's constraints, so it tolerates the hidden alliance while continuing to push for public recognition. This creates a situation where the alliance operates at full intensity beneath the surface while remaining officially denied. Both countries benefit from this arrangement. The intelligence cooperation is as real as it would be if they had an official treaty. The military coordination is as effective. The strategic alignment is complete. But each country gets something different from the arrangement. Saudi Arabia gets strategic benefits without domestic political costs, and Israel gets a de facto ally working toward the same regional goals. Here's the fundamental truth that observers of Middle Eastern politics need to grasp. Israel and Saudi Arabia are allies. They're not secretly allied, they're openly secretly allied. Everyone knows it. Analysts know it. Regional governments know it. Media outlets report on it. The only people who are supposed to pretend it doesn't exist are the Saudi and Israeli governments themselves. But that pretense is cracking. Every year, it becomes more visible. Every intelligence leak confirms it. Every military operation reveals it. The question isn't whether the alliance exists. The question is when both countries will finally admit what everyone already knows. When that moment comes, it will fundamentally reshape Middle Eastern politics. It will end the last vestiges of the Arab-Israeli conflict as an organizing principle of regional relations. It will establish Iran containment as the central issue in Middle Eastern geopolitics. It will confirm that pragmatism has defeated ideology in the region's most powerful states. That transformation is already happening. It's just happening quietly, beneath the surface, hidden in intelligence reports and encrypted communications and secret meetings at the Dorchester Hotel. The question now is not whether this alliance is real. It's how long it stays hidden before the world has to acknowledge what actually drives Middle Eastern geopolitics today. The answer is not much longer.